Once again, on behalf of our community, we'd like to welcome you to the April 17th, 2020 Stagen Community Forum. This is part 4 of a 5-part series where we are gathering each Friday to bring our community together and a handful of special guests to really explore how to most effectively lead ourselves, lead others, and lead our stakeholders through the current state of our world. We are encouraging each community forum, all of the attendees and those that are able to watch in the recording, to remind yourself of the importance of being grounded in these moments of leadership. You are setting the tone every time you're leading a phone call, a Zoom meeting, whatever you're doing in a leadership capacity, you are setting the tone. You are leaking energy. Is that energy that is resourceful, or is it stressful energy? And so be aware of your body, because this is a tool that's with you all the time, and your breath is with you all the time, of how can you actually bring your most resourced and your most effective self into each moment. The series started with Peter Kastenbaum's article from Fast Company magazine, which we've been encouraging all of the attendees to read both before each of these weekly calls and as an exercise on the other side of the weekly calls. Even though you might say to yourself, I've already read the article, it's only 6 pages, it's very quick. You're different every time you have experiences. And so as you are different, when you read that article, it's going to be experienced through the new perspective that you have. So we want to keep going back to that, as we've been referring to this as our touchstone. Before I introduce our speaker today, I want to remind you of some of the big themes that we've been exploring in this series. The big idea that we started with is the concept, it's not what happens as a leader, it's not what happens, but rather how we relate to what happens. Recognizing that we have the opportunity to relate with whatever is happening in our environment in a way that is informed by our training. And our training has been, for many of you, for years of training, and for some of you, almost 2 decades of training with us. How can we actually bring awareness into our life experience? Because with awareness, there is choice. With awareness, there is choice. Without awareness, only habit. We talked in the beginning of the series about how most people are not operating, especially leaders, from a place of full awareness, and therefore are reacting and habitually reacting into a place of fear. And that place of fear has caused many leaders to implement coping strategies like avoiding what's going on, coping strategies like rebelling to what's going on, coping strategies like complying, giving up our own agency and just going along with what others are saying. And we want you to realize that this time, this leadership time, is not about coping strategies, but rather growth strategies. Today's speaker is going to specifically get at the idea of our own learning and our own growth in this very uncertain time. And a last few reminders of where we've been. 3 weeks ago, when we did this first call, just 3 weeks ago, I'll speak for myself. I can acknowledge that I was feeling not just disoriented, but I was feeling at that time overwhelmed and almost in a place of feeling not even knowing what to do, a place of almost my own version of shock. And I think we can all relate with this for ourselves and for our stakeholders. And that is why it was so important that we were grabbed by Andy Eby in the first of the series when he brought a call to action. And his message was, even though you're confused, even though you're overwhelmed, even though you're feeling possibly in a place of shock, that we need to act. We need to step into the arena, and we need to do something that's going to bring us forward, and we will learn as we go. And then our second report from the field was from fellow member Sean McGinnis. And Sean McGinnis built on this call to action with a call to relating. How can we see the importance of checking in with others and asking them, how are they doing? How's their family doing? Are they taking care of themselves? and what can we do to be of service to them. And in Sean's call, we explored the importance of seeing the time right now, not as a time to extract, but rather as a time to serve, not as a time to be opportunistic, but rather as a time to create value. And on the other side of Sean, in week 3, our religious scholar, Viddeva, came in with a call to deepening. So a call to action, a call to relating, a call to deepening. And today's call, which I'll now introduce our speaker, Dave Patnaik from San Francisco, the founder and CEO of Jump Associates, one of the country's leading strategy and innovation firms. And Dave, a fellow member of yours, is going to bring us into a call to learning. And this call to learning, to growing, to developing is completely aligned with the purpose of Jump Associates. But most importantly, this report from the field is going to bring us to a place of a future orientation. And how do the behaviors of our stakeholders, especially our customers, how do those behaviors need to be thought of in different ways so that we can prepare ourselves to continue to thrive in the time ahead? So with that, it is my great pleasure to hand the call over to Dave Patnaik, who's going to spend 20 minutes giving us an insight into his report from the field. So Dave, the call is now yours.
Grant, thank you so much for convening this, not just for having me, but for putting this together. I know the first call I was on, that when I saw all of your faces, I have to be honest with you, I don't listen to the advice about putting it into speaker view. I love the gallery view where I can see all 150 of us, 200 of us, 300 of us together in these calls. And so I just feel like and I look around and I see people who I've met before, like, oh, look, there's Andy, or like, hey, Corey, how are you? People, who I don't get to see that often, where it's like coming to church in the most beautiful way. So I'm still in gallery view, I have to say. I'm sitting here in San Mateo, which is just outside of San Francisco, and I'm talking to you from my kitchen. I spend about 150,000 miles on the road every year. So this is very different for me to be. It's like spending time in my house, and it's like hanging out with a person that you knew, but you didn't know that well. And I don't have a home office or anything like that because I'm never home. So I'm at my kitchen table here, which I really quite love. Behind me is, this is our creativity corner. If you can see it, I have 2 kids, a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. And we had that in a separate room for a long time. But we wanted all the art stuff in the kitchen so that when I was cooking dinner, I'm a single parent and I have them half the time. When I'm cooking dinner, they're making stuff right here. And so we're all in the same place with that. You can see all of that back there. And it's funny, I have them half the time, which is, I have my kids for a couple of days, and then on like Wednesday, I drop them off at school, and then I get on a plane and I'm traveling and I'm not here. And now I drop them off with their mom, who's a wonderful person, but then I'm by myself for 2.5 days. And I'm finding myself with a new emotion that I didn't have before, which is I'm missing my kids more. And, I love my kids, but I'm like really missing them. I'm like, oh, what would Maya say about that? In a way that is quite surprising to me and making me feel a little bit choked up. And so I'm discovering emotions in this period that I didn't know. And I'm trying to come from a place of curiosity about it. I'm also trying to come from a place of gratitude because, I'm calling all of my clients. We have deep relationships with a lot of kind of like really visionary leaders in Fortune 500 companies. And what I'm finding is everybody's in a different place emotionally. My kids are 12 and 9. It is so much tougher to work from home if your kids are 5 and 3 and 1. And to actually like have that kind of like, oh, I have to have a child on my lap while I'm doing these conference calls, right? There are other people who even, with my clients, at least they are fairly well off. There are people who have been economically seriously hard hit by this. And my mom slipped and fell 2 nights ago and hit her head and had to be rushed for a CT scan. So it's very hard for me to be complaining about being cooped up here. Right? But I am still shocked at the amount of drastic change that's happened. Like if you went back in time to February and you asked Dave in February, if you said, February, Dave, what are the odds that you think that in the 8 weeks from now, 4 billion people, half of the human species, is going to be under voluntary house arrest? February, they would have said, that's not happening. That's crazy. That's not going to go on. And you ask April Dave, what do you think about it? I'm like, oh, February Dave was an idiot. He couldn't see. He couldn't think big enough about all the changes that are going to disrupt the world. The Wuhan stuff was already in the news. Okay? Well, and if you ask, April Dave, well, what are the odds you think that things are going to change again in a transformative way? What are the odds that by September, this will have all gone away and we will have a massive transformation, but the kind of transformation where we do the deep restructuring of our companies and our society, that we will then put ourselves on a 20-year era of a new growth path, not seen since the post-World War II period. I would say by September, that seems nuts. That's crazy. I mean, yeah, but February Dave was nuts. He didn't think you'd hear it. April Dave is making the same mistake, right? That we're not actually living into a place of real learning about what's happening. And so, with the folks that we work with, the first month or so was just go mode. It was leaning in. It was making sure, like, are people safe? We have enough cash to keep the lights on, right? And just making sure that can we pay everybody, right? Can we focus on our culture to make sure that we emerge from this better than when we started? And it was very much go mode. We were leaning in. And many of us are thinking, okay, well, now I need to start planning for the longer term about, like, where are we going to be in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, 36 months? And so I'm telling all of our friends, don't worry about that. Don't spend time on that yet. Spend time right now in the next 3 months talking about, like, what are things that you could do right now that would have immediate impact for the people you care about, for the people that matter, that would actually really bring your purpose to life, that would actually really have an impact. We work with a great company in Canada called Loblaw. We don't know them in the US, but 95% of Canadians get their groceries from a different Loblaw brand. They own, imagine someone who owned Kroger and Whole Foods and Safeway, right? And they serve all of Canada. And Loblaw's purpose is to help Canadians live life well. Well, if ever there was a moment in time when living life well was top of mind, right, that really mattered, it's during a pandemic, right? And they did the go mode stuff. They did stuff like social distancing and having an extra hour in their grocery store in the morning to make sure that, seniors can come in and shop. And they're paying their workers $2 an hour more right now to help them get through this. But living life well, that's a bigger calling. That's a bigger thing. And so we're exploring all sorts of different things. Some of you know my dear friend Bill Hayward, who's part of the Stagen community, and he has this thing called the Hayward score, that he can measure how healthy your home is. And he and I were on a call last week, and he said, Dave, we're really worried because we can score your home, but our model is based on the assumption that you are not in your home 24/7. And his model suggests that in the next 90 days, we may have a bunch of people who are showing up at emergency rooms with respiratory illness, and it has nothing to do with coronavirus. It's completely by the fact that we're living in this enclosed space with each other, breathing each other's carbon dioxide. And so talking about that with Loblaw, how can they use something like a Hayward score? Maybe they need to be introducing that to all Canadians to help them live life well. And what else could we be doing to actually bring our purpose to life? And if we do that, then we can start to imagine the kind of things that February Dave was setting aside. Then we can start to think about the kind of things of, like, where is this world going? And, there's a lot of consultants, and I'm a consultant too, but there's a lot of consultants out there who are putting out a lot of decks right now. Y'all are business leaders. I'm sure you're reading a lot of stuff. Some of it is pretty good. Some of it is crap. Most of it is unhelpful, right? Because they're all trying to look really smart. They're all trying to say, well, here's what's going to happen. And it's violating the basic point of all this, if you've read the Kestenbaum article, which is that we need to come from a place of learning. We need to come from a place that says, number one, I don't know, but I'd love to find out the answer, and look into, our teams and our customers and our partners and say, like, help me learn my way through this. Help me figure this out. And that's so hard for so many of us as leaders. Implicit, I think, for many of us is this belief that as a CEO, you got to have all the answers. You got to get, people need clarity. They need direction. And I tell you, the best things that I've done with my team is I'm getting on calls with them just like this, and I'm just like, help me, guys. What do we do? Like, what do you think we should do about X? And they're coming up with amazing answers and just trying to hold the space for learning to occur. And they're telling me amazing things. My team has taught me, we've actually come up with a new framework for how to do the strategic planning stuff, right? The way we do this with all of our clients, and, we, again, big companies like, US Bank and Target and people like that, the way you typically do it is kind of this thing called scenario planning. You make a 2x2 and you say, like, well, maybe the economy will come back a lot, or maybe it'll come back a little. Or maybe the healthcare response will be really good, or maybe it won't. And then you make 4 boxes and you say, okay, so here's what will happen. And what we're finding is that's not working, and it doesn't work because that kind of model is good for 5 years out or 7 years out, but it's not good for 6 months or 12 months or 9. It's too general, it's too broad. So what we're instead doing with our clients is we're saying, look, you have a business model, and that business model is maybe a couple of things. Your McDonald's, you make food and you serve it up in local kitchens to people, and you have to maintain a franchise network, and you manage real estate. That's your business model. Well, that business model has a set of stakeholders, right? And as we all know, because we've all done that stakeholder work, you have customers and you have team members, they have franchisees, McDonald's, they have communities that they have to work with. Well, each of those stakeholders have certain behaviors and mindsets that are required to have them play along with you for this business model to work, right? You need to be able to, people need to come into the McDonald's and order. And team members have to be willing to work in a restaurant in close confined quarters with each other. And all of these behaviors are what make that business model work. Well, here's the thing. At the end of this crisis, some of those behaviors are going to come roaring right back. And some of those behaviors are going to take a left turn. They're going to be truly transformed. And some of those behaviors are just going away. And the biggest thing you can inquire into right now is, what are the behaviors that your business model is most dependent on? And which behaviors are coming back, which behaviors are getting transformed, and which behaviors are going away? I think back after 9/11, right? After 9/11, nobody was staying in hotels, right? Do you remember that? No one was staying for about a quarter and a half. But then, hotel occupancy came right back. Everybody started staying in hotels again. That was a sustained behavior. It came right back. There was other behaviors that they came back, but they looked so different. They were completely transformed. Air travel. It's not like we stopped flying on planes, but suddenly we have to show up an hour in advance. We have to take our shoes off, and there's pre-check. Right? Airports had to start investing in all of this technology for security screening that existed before, by the way. It was around, just nobody was adopting it, but they had to start doing it. So air travel flying on planes was transformed in what it looked like. It was a left turn. And there were the behaviors that didn't come back. And I think about, with some of our financial service clients, things like investment vehicles. It turned, like the kind of things that people were investing in changed. A lot of Russians started buying up a lot of real estate in Midtown Manhattan. Why did that happen after 9/11? Because it turns out the Patriot Act put in a bunch of rules about financial investment. And it said, among other things, that if you're going to park a lot of money in the United States, you got to tell us where you got that money from, because we want to make sure you're not a terrorist. Well, there's a lot of people who didn't want to tell people where that money was coming from. Well, in the Patriot Act, there was one little carve out that said, if you buy property in the United States, you don't have to tell people much of anything. And so not surprising, a lot of Russian oligarchs started buying up real estate, buying condos in Midtown Manhattan. And other investment vehicles totally collapsed, just went away. And so that isn't macro forces of like, is it going to be better? Is it better? Is it like 6% growth or 8% growth? Is it a recession or not? These are the little behaviors that are going to mess with your business. Some are coming right back. Some are completely changing forever. And some are just not coming. Some are going to be sustained. Some are going to be transformed. And some are going to collapse. So the biggest thing that we're telling our friends in the world is, I know in this time, your brain gets foggy. It's so hard because, you know, the brain, when does the brain get foggy? The neuroscience says your brain gets foggy when it doesn't know how to think about something, right? Your brain does not, it uses a lot of energy. So it doesn't like to shoot, you know, and create new neural pathways. As much as possible, it would like to shoot electricity down the existing pathways. So when you have a new experience that says, well, how do I map this to something I already have? And now we're in a situation where like, brain, old baby, this thing maps it to nothing that you got. You actually have to grow new pathways. And so our brain feels foggy. Takes a lot of electricity to like grow new pathways. But if we can lean into the fogginess and not feel like we have to have the answers and come to a place of real learning, we can get really micro, specific. What is my business? Who do I really depend on in terms of stakeholders to play along and do this dance with me? What are their behaviors? And how are their behaviors going to change in the next 6 months, year, and years going forward? So if there's anything I'm coming out of this with is both gratitude and appreciation and an even deeper love for my kids and a renewed call to that kind of learning. So I don't know, but I'd love to figure it out together. Thank you so much for letting me do this with y'all. I just love hanging out with you.
And Dave, I want to offer up a little bit of back and forth here. And so a couple of things that I want to appreciate is that you're obviously bringing in a very grounded way this idea of having a learner mindset. So as we all remember from the learning and practice module, how do we move from the mindset of the knower to the mindset of the learner? And I appreciate giving yourself and your clients and all of us on the call permission that we don't actually have to have the answers right now. We don't have to have the answers for our team. We don't have to have the answers for our customers, for our stakeholders. What we need right now is to actually have the curiosity, the consciousness, to be able to, and the faith, to be able to lean into the question. And I think a lot of times you and I have talked about this idea of how do we live the question as opposed to come with an answer prematurely. And I really appreciate you modeling this. As leaders, sometimes we need to actually demonstrate vulnerable strength by saying to our own team, I don't know. And I feel like if we lean in on this together, we can figure this out together better than if I try to figure it out by myself. And then the same thing with the customers. How do we work together to actually experience the answer as a process as opposed to me coming as the quote expert? Is that am I reinforcing these big ideas in a way that makes sense?
Right. That's exactly right. Because otherwise, you know, in a time like this, it's so seductive to speak in big generalities or to lead into kind of illusions of certainty. Well, we're betting on the chance that we're going to return to about a 4% growth rate. Come on.
Yeah.
Right? That doesn't help anybody. It feels good. It's easy to hide behind, you know, illusionary certainty. It just doesn't help.
I'm struck and appreciating Dave for acknowledging that being unsettled, being uncertain is a natural part of life, and that life will return to some level of normal, but that for many of us, we're changing all the time. Going through the ILP changed me, and how I would juxtapose that for this process that we're going through is going through the ILP. I felt like I had some illusion of control. And the changes I was going through in the ILP, I couldn't predict. I was not in the driver's seat on, but to some degree, I felt like I was showing up to the sessions, I was making these active choices, and the anxiety that's created for me in this moment comes from being conscious that I'm not in control. I realize deep down, and I'm humbled by the realization that all the ways in that I've changed in the time I've been on this earth have been largely me in the passenger seat, me reacting, Rand, as you say, me choosing my attitude and choosing my behaviors in this moment. And so I'm somewhat settled by the acknowledgement that this is not so different from other terrible things that have happened to our country, to the world, that there will be a return to some level of normal. We don't need to know what that's going to be. Our call as leaders is to walk our talk, live our values, and to humble ourselves to not feel like we have to have an answer in this moment.
And so, Dave, if you're with us, can you share one or two words on how you're feeling? And once again, deep gratitude is what I'm feeling that you were with us today. But anything you want to share?
It's super kind of centered and kind of with a renewed curiosity to open up. What I learned from Vid last week, and I'm still coasting off of that, is that in times of stress, I retreat up into my head and I just go all thinking, and there's no feeling and body. I'll just work the problem. And in the last couple of weeks, because I think as everything that Vid said to us last week, I started to like open the door of my brain and peek out and see the rest of my body, thinking I would be flooded by all of this insanity of fear and chaos and anxiety or anger. What's out there? And what I found was love. Like I found like, oh my God, look how much I'm feeling love for my kids. And like, oh my God, I'm like, look how much I'm feeling love for my teammates and love for my clients. And so I am just poke it out of my brain more and more. Now I'm feeling centered to go out of my brain and explore my heart and see what else I'm going to feel.
When you hear him say it's about behaviors, and some behaviors are going to come back, sustaining behaviors. Some behaviors are going to come back, but they're going to come back very differently, kind of this transformed behavior. And some behaviors just aren't coming back. I loved how clear he was with that. They're just going to collapse. So share with your partners what's landing for you, what's resonating for you. Are you thinking about these three dimensions of what's coming back differently, and what's not coming back? And how might that change your own thinking and your own learning about strategy for your business?